Have you ever had a D&D character try something so ridiculous,
Oh, yeah,
like so out there that it's still a story you tell years later?
definitely.
You know, like when a character just goes completely off script and it's either brilliant or just hilarious.
Right. Or both at the same time.
Exactly. And today we're diving into those moments. We're talking about advanced D&D character shenanigans.
The kind of stuff that goes beyond the usual. You know,
Yeah, like not just your typical warrior or rogue. We're talking about truly unconventional characters.
and the unpredictable things they can do.
Exactly. And we're going to be looking at an article by Amir Barakat on LitRPG Reads called Roll With It: Advanced Tips and Tricks for Creative D&D Character Shenanigans.
That's a great one.
Yeah, we want to look at how this kind of unconventional play, both when you're making a character and when you're actually playing the game, can lead to really memorable moments.
And it's not just about random silliness, like you said. There's a real art to this.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start with character creation. Barakat says it's important to think outside the box of traditional character archetypes.
You know those cookie-cutter heroes and villains.
Right. So what's the benefit of creating a character that's a little more unique?
Well, think about it this way. Every story needs something fresh, something that breaks the mold.
Mm.
When you have a character that doesn't fit the norm, it forces everyone to think differently.
Yeah, you can't just rely on those old tropes.
Exactly. You have to figure out what makes this character tick,
Mm.
what their goals are, how they approach problems. It makes the story so much more interesting.
And it probably leads to more immersive storylines, too.
Oh, definitely. When you have a character with a really unusual background or personality, it opens up all sorts of possibilities for the game.
They might have connections to unexpected factions or a completely different worldview.
Right, and even a small quirk can become a major plot point down the line.
And it gives you more opportunities to be creative as a player.
Absolutely. You have to
Yeah.
think on your feet and come up with solutions that fit the character.
And Barakat has some great examples of this, like the halfling rogue who only speaks in haikus.
Or the tiefling bard who believes that mismatched socks are lucky.
How do these kinds of quirky concepts actually play out in the game?
Well, they give you what we call role-playing hooks. Like, imagine trying to convey urgency or a complicated message in haiku form.
That'd be challenging.
It forces the other players and the DM to engage with you in a totally new way.
And the mismatched socks could become a whole storyline on their own.
Right. Maybe it's a superstition or a connection to their past. It sparks everyone's imagination.
It makes you really commit to playing the character.
Yeah, you have to think, what would my character do, even if it's a little out there?
And it sounds like it encourages everyone to have more fun.
Definitely D&D should be about enjoying yourself, and these kinds of characters remind us of that.
Now let's talk about combining classes and races in unusual ways. Barakat talks about gnomes, barbarians, and orc wizards.
Talk about breaking the mold.
Right. What's the potential there for both humor and depth?
Well, the humor comes from the surprise. Like you see a gnome barbarian and you just think, what? But then you start to wonder, why is this gnome so angry? What made them choose this path?
It challenges your assumptions.
Exactly. And it can lead to some really interesting backstories and motivations.
And there's also the question of how these combinations work mechanically.
Like a half-orc bard, for example.
Yeah, that's a good one.
You've got the half-orc's strength and maybe a bit of social awkwardness combined with the bard's charisma and performance skills.
It's a recipe for some unpredictable moments.
Right. Maybe they're amazing at battle cries, but terrible at courtly etiquette. It makes you think outside the box as a player.
So it's not just about creating a funny character, it's about finding interesting ways to make those combinations work.
Exactly. You want to find the synergy or even the discord that makes it unique.
Now let's talk about role-playing beyond the norm. Barakat talks about eccentric personalities, strange habits, and bizarre quirks.
The little things that make a character come alive.
How do those details turn a set of stats into a real person?
It's about making the character believable, even in a fantasy world.
Like giving them a unique way of speaking or a particular obsession.
Right, maybe they have a nervous tic or a strange ritual they do before every fight.
And these quirks can lead to some really fun moments in the game.
Absolutely, like a druid who collects shiny objects, or a paladin who speaks in rhyme.
It gives the other player something to react to.
And it could even create opportunities for the DM to introduce new plot points.
Barakat lists a bunch of these quirky concepts. A dwarf who refuses to wear shoes, an elven ranger who names every animal they meet, a tiefling warlock with an imaginary friend.
And we've got the wine-pairing barbarian, the battlefield-tidying cleric. So many possibilities.
What's the value of these specific quirks?
Where each one tells a story. Like, why doesn't the dwarf wear shoes? What kind of relationship does the ranger have with the animals?
Makes you want to know more.
Exactly. And it can lead to some really engaging role-playing moments.
But it's important to balance this humor with depth.
Right. You don't want your character to be a joke.
So how do you make sure that these eccentric characters can still be taken seriously?
Well, you have to remember that these quirks are just one part of the character. They can still have goals, fears, and motivations.
And their unique perspective might even help them solve problems in unexpected ways.
Right. And sometimes humor is a way of dealing with difficult emotions. It can add depth to the character.
So it's not about sacrificing seriousness, it's about finding the right balance.
Exactly. You want your character to be both funny and believable.
Now let's talk about shenanigans in action. Those moments where those unconventional character builds lead to hilarious and unforgettable moments in the game.
The stories you tell over and over again.
Can you give us some examples of how this creative chaos plays out?
Oh, there's so many. Like, imagine a gnome rogue convincing a dragon that it's a giant chicken.
That's amazing.
Or an elven bard leading a musical parade to diffuse a tense situation.
Those sound like stories that would become legendary.
And then there are the truly unpredictable moments, like a wizard accidentally polymorphing into a sheep during negotiations.
Or a fighter challenging a guard to a dance-off.
You never know what's going to happen.
And it's important to celebrate those moments.
Absolutely. They're part of what makes D&D so much fun.
Now let's talk about how shenanigans change depending on the setting. Barakat mentions urban wilderness and cosmic or planar settings.
Each one has its own possibilities.
So how might the antics differ?
Well, in an urban setting, you might see things like elaborate heists or public pranks.
Like a bard organizing a flash mob?
Exactly. Or a rogue pulling off a very theatrical theft.
In the wilderness, it might be more about interacting with nature.
Right. Maybe a druid befriends a strange creature, or a ranger sets up nature-themed practical jokes.
And in cosmic settings, the possibilities are endless.
You could have interdimensional tea parties or debates with elemental beings.
It sounds like you really have to adapt your shenanigans to the environment.
Oh, definitely a prank that works in a city might fall flat in the forest.
And speaking of adapting, let's talk about combat. How can you bring creative chaos to a fight?
Well, it's about thinking beyond the usual attack and spellcasting.
Like a bard using vicious mockery to completely demoralize an enemy.
Right, or a wizard creating a distraction with an illusion.
Barakat gives some great examples, like a rogue who tries to kill an enemy with paper cuts.
Or a cleric who summons a rainbow.
And let's not forget the barbarian who challenges a dragon to a roaring contest.
It's about finding those unexpected and hilarious ways to use your abilities.
It sounds like laughter can be a weapon in itself.
Definitely, it can make even the toughest battles more enjoyable.
Finally, let's talk about blending humor with emotional depth. Can these silly characters still have serious moments?
Absolutely. In fact, those serious moments can be even more impactful when they come from a character who's usually known for their comedic side.
Like the clown with a hidden sorrow.
Exactly. It shows that even the most eccentric characters have depth.
So it's not about choosing between humor and seriousness, it's about finding the right mix.
And when you do that, you create a truly memorable story.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear that embracing creative chaos in D&D can lead to some truly amazing experiences.
It makes the game more fun, more unpredictable, and more meaningful.
And it's something that both players and dungeon masters can benefit from.
This exploration of D&D shenanigans comes from LitRPG Reads, specifically an article called Roll With It, Advanced Tips and Tricks for Creative D&D Character Shenanigans. It was written by Amir Barakat, who also goes by Bardic Lore. We'd also like to give a shout out to Paul Bello for his contributions to LitRPG.
Now we want to hear from you. Have you had any unforgettable D&D moments thanks to an unconventional character?
Share your stories in the comments below.
And as you plan your next campaign, think about this. What crazy character idea might lead to your most epic adventure yet?
The possibilities are endless.
Until next time, may your dice rolls be ever in your favor.